We have some guests here tonight, some young men who are, I think, in a confirmation class at a church here in Berkeley. So I thought I would take the opportunity to give something of an introductory talk. So for those of you who have been coming for a long time, keep your don't know mind, because if you think you know something, you've got a big problem. So I know even for myself, as I think through an introductory talk, it's familiar, but it's always good to hear it again, because it's very easy for us to get stuck in our own ideas about what Buddhist practice and what Zen practice is about. And if Zen is about anything, it's about not knowing. It's about keeping a flexible, resilient, open mind, acknowledging the humanness that we all share, and finding a way to find some balance and stability in the face of all of the ups and downs of our existence. We had an 8-day retreat here at Empty Gate Zen Center last week, and every evening at about 6:45, we did Kwanzaa Bosal chanting. Those of us who are here tonight, we did that at around 7 o'clock. And we talk about that as the chant of compassion. And what we did during the retreat is I led the chanting, and I have someone in my family who's had a bad accident, and so I offered her name as someone that we might chant for. And we had, let's average it out, about 23, 24 people here in the room every night. And I asked people if anybody else had someone in their life or something in their life that had a difficult situation. The only reason I say something is a couple of people talked about their dogs who had been quite ill or maybe had died. And it was an amazing experience to hear as people went around the room. At some point during the week, just about everybody had someone in mind. And the truth of our existence is that there's a lot of difficulty and suffering that we have to meet, we have to find our way to deal with, we have to find our way through. And the challenge is to be able to meet the sadness, to meet the suffering, to meet the difficulty, and also at the same time acknowledge the joy, the beauty, the wonder, the amazing quality of, you could say, a miracle, that we're actually here right now. What has to happen for all of us to sit in this room is incredible. Probably each one of us has had some near tragic experience happen to us. And if not us, we know people in our families, or we have friends, we know people in our lives who just horrible things happen out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere. And if Zen practice is anything, it's about preparing ourselves to be able to meet these challenges with open-heartedness and with some compassion, love, and wisdom. And to use that to both help the situations that we find ourselves in, and to be able to remember the incredible beauty and dynamism that this whole world provides for us. So I want to read a poem that everybody in their first individual interview with me gets to read out loud. So I'm going to read it out loud. And it's called The Human Root. Coming empty-handed, going empty-handed, that is human. When you're born, where do you come from? When you die, where do you go? Life is like a floating cloud which appears. Death is like a floating cloud which disappears. The floating cloud itself originally does not exist. Life and death coming and going are also like that. But there is one thing which always remains clear. It is pure and clear, not depending on life and death. Then, what is the one pure and clear thing? I've offered this poem to hundreds of people, and people grapple with this question: what is the one pure and clear thing? On one level, just an honest response of "don't know" really hits the bill. When you were born, where do you come from? Nobody really knows. When you die, where do you go? Nobody knows. Religions, philosophical systems talk about it and have ideas about it, but nobody knows. And that's the fundamental truth of our life. We don't know. But from the point of view of Zen practice, if you can get grounded and a little more comfortable in that not knowing, the whole world opens up to us. Because we're curious, we're alive, we're inquiring, we're wondering, what is it? So when I ask people, what is the one pure and clear thing? Sometimes they'll say God, sometimes they'll say Buddha, sometimes they'll say Tao, sometimes they'll say energy, sometimes they say consciousness. And all of those are reasonably good answers. Except there's one big problem with it. They're all conceptual. We say the word God. Well, who really knows what God is? We say the word consciousness. Scientists keep trying to study what consciousness is, but it's like grabbing water. You can get some idea of it, but then you're always leaving something else out. It's always flitting off away from you. And as practitioners of Buddhism, we can say Buddha, we can say Buddha nature. Those are nice words, but they only have the meaning that we give them. Fundamentally, they're concepts with no meaning. And Zen and Buddhism together are very concrete. It's not an idea. So when I say we come to this place of don't know, maybe we can say it's mystery. And our life is touching into the mystery without trying to grab hold of some name or some idea. Each moment, what the one pure and clear thing is being revealed to us. If our eyes are open, if our hearts are open, if our ears are listening, and our mind is clear, the one pure and clear thing is always right in front of us. Always. It's always changing. It's always not exactly what we think it is, but it's always right here. So that's the entry point into Zen practice. What is this? Or sometimes we say, what am I? Because looked at from another angle, we humans are in a terrible predicament. We start out as infants, totally helpless, totally dependent on people around us to take care of us. And this is half a joke and half I'm serious, but I often say we're all raised by crazy people because our caregivers are all struggling and suffering and trying to figure out what life is about. At the same time, they have to take care of us. So we're all lost in this dream of life and we don't know what's going on. So we grab at things. We try to make it okay. Some of us grab at drugs and alcohol. Some of us grab at trying to be very powerful and control other people. But every family situation is unique, and everyone is different, and in my estimation, everyone is a bit crazy. So here we are, these infants, who are totally dependent on these crazy people. So what do? My nephew has a 2-year-old son, and he told me that the pediatrician told them that up till about 3 months, anything an infant is doing is pretty authentic. That's what they need. If they're hungry, they let you know they're hungry. If they're tired, they let you know if they're tired. But on about 3 months, an infant learns the capacity to manipulate their caregivers. So if they need something and they figure out at 3 months old that if they give a little smile, they're going to get what they want, they learn to use that smile, even if they don't really feel like smiling. So all of us from a very early age start to learn how to manipulate the environment to get things that we want or need. This happens thousands and thousands of times a day. It becomes second nature. By the time we're 4, 5, 6 years old, we're masters at it. So there's this feedback loop that we're dealing with all the time. There's the fact that we need things and want things, and there are always, and this is true for us as adults also, there's always somebody, somewhere, that holds the key to what we want. And we figure out a way to manipulate the situation to get it. The trouble with this, it's brilliant, and it works. Look, we've got people of all ages sitting in this room. We're all here. We all survive the madness. So it's brilliant on one level. But on another level, there's a fundamental problem that happens. We lose something authentic, something real about ourselves. So we actually end up living a life that's false in so many ways. We lose contact with something deeply real and authentic in ourselves. Ironically, my experience says it's never that far away. But for a lot of us in a lot of situations, it's very risky to contact it. This losing ourselves is one of the bases of the suffering that we experience in our lives. So in Zen, we talk often about returning to our true self. We've lost ourselves, and we're practicing to return to ourselves. I've found lately, I've asked many people this question: how is it that you think? Do you think in words? Do you think in pictures? What goes on in your inner landscape, in your mind inside? What is it that you're thinking about and feeling that you're hiding, that you don't show to the world? If you read novels, you often notice there'll be this paragraph about the inner experience of the character. They're angry at this person, that somebody walks in the door and they hate that person. And they wish that person would never be in their presence. And the writer will go through a long explanation of all the grievances that the person has, and then there's a sentence of dialogue. And the sentence of dialogue says, "How wonderful to see you! I've missed you! It's been so long." Completely inauthentic. Completely unreal. So, what we're trying to do so much in our practice is to make our inside and outside connected. We say to become one. We're split. Most of us don't even know what it is that's going on at all. So the first thing we have to do is we have to ask the question, what am I? And basically, just like we did tonight for 20 minutes, sit down and investigate that question. What am I? What's real here? And the first thing we have to do is get in contact with what that inner landscape is, how our consciousness actually operates, what kind of thoughts and feelings and ideas and opinions and beliefs we have, how it is we operate in any given situation. What do you do when you don't like what's going on? What do you do when you want something and you can't have it? What do you do when you have something and you're afraid you're going to lose it? What the Buddha taught is the first of his Four Noble Truths, which is the basic foundation of Buddhism, is life is imbued with suffering. We're always chasing after things we can't have. We're always losing things we don't want to lose. People leave us, we get abandoned, we lose things, friends move away. We want to be close to someone, but they don't want to be close to us. Or maybe they want to be close to us, but we don't want to be close to them, and we don't know how to deal with that situation. We're constantly dealing with things and acting in ways that we're not clear about. So we do this really very basic practice. We sit down, we hold ourselves just like the meditation instruction from this evening, in a very stable posture, and we slowly breathe in, and we slowly breathe out. Scientists who do research on relaxation early in the 70s discovered that about 6 to 10 breaths a minute can help you move into a state of relaxation. Really, 6 breaths a minute. And that's one breath every 6 seconds. 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. That's short. And yet most of us are breathing at twice that pace. So we're like this, like a dog. And we can't settle in. We can't find our own grounding. So the first thing we do is we slow our breath down. And as Paul said in meditation instruction, we breathe from our diaphragm. Our diaphragm is about here. And what happens when you do diaphragmatic breathing, your diaphragm pushes out and then down. And as it pushes down, your belly pushes out. So you breathe in a way, rather than your chest expanding and contracting, it's all done with the diaphragm. So if you watch my hand, you breathe in, the belly pushes out. You breathe out, and the belly falls. In Asia, this place about 1 inch to 2 inches below your navel, in Japan they call it the hara. In Korea and China they call it the tanjen or tandien. Tanjen or tandien literally translates energy garden. So we breathe slowly and deeply, and we bring our attention and awareness into our energy garden. Another way you can think about this place is our true home. When life gets out of whack, we're stressed out, we're confused, we don't know what to do, people are doing things to us that we don't like, we're meeting situations that are too much for us. There's a really simple exercise we can do to gain some balance and some resilience to the moment. And that's returning to this energy garden, returning to our home. And just slowly breathing in and slowly breathing out. Nobody has to know that you're doing it. When things are freaking you out, just slow your breath. Return to your home, your energy garden, and let that place balance you. So, the Buddha taught, as I said, that we suffer because we want things we don't have, or we have things we're afraid to lose, and we're always losing them, and we're always not getting what we want. And chasing after things that we want, protecting ourselves from things that we don't want, is the basic rhythm of our lives. That rhythm creates falseness. Zen practice is to return to what's true. And again, I'll say it, unless we investigate our lives and really dig in deeply inside, we don't know what's true. We're just chasing after phantoms. A lot of what we do, especially when we're young, is we follow what other people tell us to do. Our teachers, our parents, our older friends, they all have their ideas on how things should be. And basically we're indoctrinated by those ideas. Some of them are wonderful ideas, but they're still other people's ideas. So what is yours? What do you actually know? What is it that you actually believe? What truthfully do you experience in your own life? So one of the things we do when we slow our breathing down and we do this sitting meditation is we just experience our own experience. What does it feel like to breathe? What does pain feel like in your body? You know, you think you know what pain is. Everybody feels pain. But until you investigate it, you don't really know what it is. I know in my own investigation, what I've found is there's sensation, but then there's my reactivity to the sensation. And that reactivity often makes the sensation that much worse. So if we can just take time to return to our own experience, it's like the clouds can open up and we can see clearly, we can hear clearly, we can taste clearly, we can touch clearly, we can think clearly, we can respond clearly. Because if we're unclear and we're just chasing after phantoms and we start to act, oftentimes we're making a bigger mess than there was before. Our selfishness, which is greed, our aversion, which is anger, they rule our lives. And then in Buddhism, there's something called the three poisons. It's basically greed, anger, and ignorance, or sometimes it's translated as delusion. And it's my sense that since we're chasing after our greed, we're ruled by our greed and our aversion or our anger, we have to create stories to justify our behavior and our actions. Those stories are our delusion. And we live our life caught up in these three things, and we don't taste the food that we're eating. We don't see the beautiful sunset as the sun is going down. We're all lost in our dream and our fantasy. So Buddhism is about waking up. And just for one more thing before I take some questions, so the Buddhists fundamentally started with what he called the Four Noble Truths, which is, I said the first one, I said, life is imbued with suffering. The second thing is, he said that suffering is caused by desire. This is what I've been talking about. Desire and anger, in some ways, are mirror images of themselves. Our greed and our anger. Chasing after what we want, protecting what we have, and pushing away what we don't want. We fundamentally, and if you go back to my example as a child, as an infant, you start manipulating the environment to get those things to happen, but it never really works. So we're always caught like rats in a maze, trying to make it work. but it's always unsatisfactory. It's never quite enough. The third of the Four Noble Truths is that there is actually a way out of suffering. And the fourth of the Four Noble Truths is that the way out of suffering is the Eightfold Path. So what happened is the Buddha discovered from his own practice and his own experience the origins of our suffering, and he found a path out of that suffering. Now, I don't have time to get into the whole Eightfold Path, but I want to just read it, and maybe I'll say just a few words about it. So, there are 8 things. 1, right view. 2, right thoughts or right thinking. 3, right speech. 4, right action. 5, right livelihood. 6, right concentration. 7, actually 6 should probably be translated right effort. 7, right mindfulness. And 8, right concentration. And basically what the Buddha taught is that if you live your life with all of these things in mind, you can transform the suffering. You can't get rid of the suffering. You can't get rid of the pain, but you can deal with the pain in such a way that it doesn't increase the suffering. I want to highlight just a couple of these before I end. And the first one is right view. And this is actually quite an important concept or idea. Because what the Buddha said is that all of us, in the way we relate to our environment, we create a story to explain things. And that story becomes our view. And we see the world through the lens of that story. Or you can maybe say the prism of that story. So in my mind, I visualize it, it's like each one of us has our own pair of glasses. And we see everything through those glasses. So I have Jeff glasses. Peter has Peter glasses. Paul has Paul glasses. Sharon has Sharon glasses. Karen has Karen glasses. Each one of us has a unique view. On one hand, that's incredibly great. But on the other hand, it blocks us. It's as if we have smoke in front of our eyes, or sunglasses that are changing the image of what's actually true. So what the Buddha taught, that the right view is no view. Seeing things as they are. And if you can think back to middle school mathematics, you learn the concept of absolute value. And if you remember, it's a number, and it's got 2 parallel lines surrounding it. And then positive or negative is outside of those lines. So it's just 2. And if you plot it on a graph, it could be 2 this way, it could be 2 this way, it could be 2 this way, it could be 2 that way. It's just 2. But we color 2 with positive or negative, likes and dislikes. And in the process of doing that, we lose sight and contact with the way things actually are. So I've heard it said that if one can find this place of no view, all the rest of this falls into place. Because we give up our fantasy, we give up our illusions, and we deal with life as it is. Right speech is quite important. How we use our tongue affects our lives in so many ways. If you speak kindly to someone, you get one result. If you speak angrily to someone, you get another result. Which one do you like? I saw this piece on 60 Minutes on TV on Sunday night, and they were interviewing a man who is the conductor of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra in New York City. And he's reputed to be the best opera conductor of our time. Incredible man. He had some bad illness. We don't need to even go there because he got better, although he's in a wheelchair now. But the interviewer was saying to him, there's something unusual about you. Your reputation is that you never yell at anyone. And the guy laughed. He said, do you like to be yelled at? Does yelling at you actually make things better? And the interviewer said, not really, but I do yell at people sometimes. He said, I don't like to be yelled at. So if I don't like it and you don't like it, if I'm trying to bring out the best in someone, if I can encourage them with compassion, with support, with seeing their beauty and acknowledging it and being able to bring it out, it works so much better. And apparently, he is the best singer, coach for singers that maybe there have been in our lifetime. Because singers love to work with them. He encourages them rather than criticizes them. So that's just one example. Somebody else can tell me how important it's been to them to be yelled at. If that works for you, that's fine. But speech makes a difference. Right effort. Applying ourselves to the situation that we find ourselves in is critical. The Chinese said it takes 3 things to practice Zen. The first is great question. I've been talking about that all evening. The second is great effort. To actually be present and make the effort to meet the moment that we find ourselves in. Without doing that, we're always retreating. We're always moving away from what's true back into the cave of our own fantasies. So right effort is critically important. Moment to moment to moment. What's happening right now? How do I respond to what's actually going on? And then the Buddha finished with right mindfulness and right concentration. And just to say, those are 2 sides of the coin of meditation. Right concentration is so important because we get so lost by things. We hear a sound we like and we drift off to the thing we like. We're always losing our center and following this and following that. Look around, watch people. We're like, our energy's always going out. Right concentration means bring your energy back in. So when we're doing our sitting meditation, on one hand, we're practicing clear concentration. Some people just focus on counting their breath. And you can go through a whole day of doing that kind of practice, and if you're really concentrating, you don't lose your count. Doesn't mean you're not thinking about other things. It doesn't mean that all sorts of other gibberish isn't going on in your mind, or hurt feelings or excited feelings going on in your heart. But your concentration is on your breath. So no matter what kind of object of meditation you use, Paul talked in our meditation instructions about clear mind, don't know. Some people say, what am I? Don't know. Some people use a mantra. Some people count their breath. It doesn't matter. Just stay present and focused on your breath and feeling your energy in your lower abdomen. And if you can keep that concentration, you've done a lot of good work. The other side of the coin of meditation is mindfulness or awareness, being able to perceive things and perceive things as they are. So while on one hand our focus is tight and clear, it's also wide and open. Because if we're paying attention to what's around us, our wisdom grows. Our concentration gives us the ability to be here, and our awareness gives us the possibility of understanding ourselves and the world around us. So with that concentration and with that wisdom, we're prepared to actually interact with the world in a way that brings healing and peace rather than divisiveness and war. Everybody talks about world peace. We all want things to be more peaceful. But if we're honest, mostly we're expecting other people to do it. If the government just acts better, if some people stop doing that, then we'll have peace. No, peace starts right here. What kind of world do we create? What kind of world do we make? There's a calligraphy at our Zen Center in Providence, Rhode Island, and it's translated, "You make, you get." The world doesn't happen to us from the outside. We actually have to respond to things that aren't of our own making. If it starts to rain, we didn't make the rain. But if we didn't pay attention to our roof, the water leaks into our house. That's not the rain's fault. The rain's just falling. But how we prepare our own house determines our experience. So, the world you want, you have to make. That's your responsibility. That's my responsibility. It's not going to happen by anybody else but ourselves. Thank you for listening. Any questions or comments? Anything anybody wants to talk about?
I thought I heard you say that discovering your authentic self or tapping into your authentic self is risky. I wonder if you could say more about.
I might not like your authentic self. You might feel really badly about that. Or you're with a group of people and you feel a certain way, but all the rest of the group says you shouldn't feel that way. Sometimes to show your real nature, you may disappoint other people. People have very strong ideas how we're supposed to be. People get punished for expressing who they are. This is just one example, but I'm remembering in my mind as I'm talking the young man, the young transsexual boy on a bus who got his clothes burned because how he was expressing himself wasn't acceptable enough to this other person. So we often hide ourselves to protect. That authenticity is kind of precious and vulnerable. So we all have a tendency to put barriers up and protections because we don't want to get hurt. But in the process, we lose something that's important. So there are many, many horrible things that are happening in our world. But one of the beautiful things that feels like is happening in our world, in our society right now, is that there's more room for us to actually express ourselves. It's becoming less acceptable to bully somebody, to hurt somebody because you don't like what they're expressing. But it still happens all the time. So it takes a lot of courage to express what it is we actually are experiencing. And what I find is that getting anchored in our lower abdomen, in our energy garden, gives us the balance and stability and the courage and the faith in ourselves to step out and express ourselves, whatever that may be. Does that answer your question? Anybody else? Question? Sergey?
You talked about our little self being created for our survival. So if we stop engaging in selfish behaviors, does it mean that we should stop caring about our own survival, or that we are decreasing the likelihood of our own survival?
This is what will save you. No, you'll actually increase your survival. Although, who knows? But if you can get the strength from your energy garden and concentrate your energy, you will have the ability to be bolder, to take a risk. And often we find out when we take risks, it actually works out okay. It's actually not as bad as we're afraid of. But you have to see. You have to try. If you don't try, you'll never know. Yeah, it's riskier. But you get to choose. Do you want to stay stuck in the hole of your defensiveness? Or do you want to experience life? Connect with the moment. See the beauty. Feel the amazing quality of what it is to actually be alive. That's the payoff. But you get to decide. Okay. Please. Yeah.
My first access point to Buddhism has been through insight meditation and Theravada Buddhism. And I'm wondering if you could help kind of describe maybe kind of the main differences you see between Korean Zen and Theravada traditions.
Insight meditation in what context?
Mostly at Spirit Rock.
Spirit Rock, yeah. Because there are different expressions of Theravada Buddhism. You know, traditionally Theravada Buddhism was more about my enlightenment, and Mahayana and Zen Buddhism were more about our enlightenment. And these days, especially in America, that barrier has broken down quite a lot. I know at Spirit Rock they teach compassion, they teach for all beings. But in the Mahayana tradition it was said, I will put off my enlightenment until everybody else can come with me. And in the traditional Theravadan, it was my own practice. And it's interesting because my wife practices at Spirit Rock. And she also practices sometimes here. And when we do a meditation retreat, she says for her the biggest difference that she experiences, that at Spirit Rock, you're pretty much on your own. When you do walking, you walk on your own. You choose if you're going to come to the Dharma or not. You eat by yourself. You choose. In a Zen retreat, it's a group experience. We walk together, we eat together, we do things. It's very much, my teacher would call it together action. So there's that. I think a lot of it has to do with the country of origin that the practice comes from. So at Spirit Rock, it tends to come from Thailand, Burma, the Southeast Asian countries. And you get some of the cultural overlays, really. Now, in Vipassana, the Asian teachers really didn't come to the United States, so the Americans set up the form, so it's very Americanized. In the Zen world, most of the Asian teachers came here, so they brought with them the practices that we know. So we wear these gray robes. For us Americans, they don't mean that much. But for my Korean teacher, these were the monastic robes. This is what they did. So we do more chanting than they would at Insight Meditation because our teachers in Zen brought the forms with them. And we have, at least for now, kept a lot of those forms. So even in Zen, Korean Zen is different than Japanese Zen. Japanese Zen is the Zen that most people know about. Chinese Zen, which is really where Zen started, is different again. Zen actually, where Buddhism went from India straight to Southeast Asia, it also went north to China. And when it went to China, Chinese philosophy and Buddhism came together. And in, I don't know, the 400 or 500s, Taoism and Buddhism came together. And out of that was birthed Zen. So Zen has a little bit more of the esoteric, naturalistic Taoist philosophy. Chinese philosophy got imbued into Buddhism and got expressed in Zen practice, where traditionally the Theravadan practice didn't have that Chinese influence. So there are big historical differences, and a lot of the texts that we use are different, but it's all Buddhism. It's just different expressions of the same thing. Does that give you a taste anyway? Anything else? Any last question or comment before we end? Carrie?
I have a question and a comment. Do we have time for both? Or?
If you're quick.
All right. Well, the comment is similar to the last question. I had a conversation with my boss today about Zen and Vipassana. She has done a lot of Vipassana. And basically her feeling about Zen was that it's too hardcore. And that even though she hasn't really directly experienced it, and that it's too, it doesn't really fit with the Western times, and it was a kind of a tough conversation. And, it's kind of hard to recall or to bring back right here. But basically, she is an African American woman, and she has found that all of her interactions with Zen in the West is that it's too hard. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of hard for me to hear that because I'd never really experienced anything other than this. But so that was just something that came up today. And then,
so you want me to comment on that?
Well, not really. My question is on a different level. Unless you want to.
I will, but go ahead. Ask your question.
Well, the question is that another part of Zen, as I understand it, is that the kind of goal of Zen is to attain enlightenment and then instruct other beings. And I just wanted to ask, who is actually instructing other beings?
You are. Right now.
I'm instructing?
Right now.
I'm asking you a question.
And I'm answering you. I want to touch in the first part of your comment. We're all sitting here, so already what she said is not quite accurate. It may be that, let's put it this way. For the most part in Asia, especially more in history than now, you had the practice that your country offered. What your culture provided, that's what you did. We in America have this amazing experience right now. Europe, it's the same way, and actually it's happening in Asia also now. There's a lot of variety. You get to choose. Some people like Vipassana because they think it's more in tune with our culture. Some people like Zen because it's not so in tune with our culture and they're kind of tired of our culture. We each have our own predilection. So go where you want. Nobody knows the real numbers, but there's also Tibetan practice that we didn't even mention. My hunch is Buddhist practice, especially in the Western convert Sangha, is pretty much split pretty evenly between Vipassana, Zen, and Tibetan. Maybe there's a little more here and there. But, sometimes in Berkeley, you got 5 different Zen centers you can go to within a 2-mile radius. And then you could go to probably another 3 or 4 Tibetan groups. There's, I think, 4 or 5 Vipassana groups in Berkeley all week long. And people choose where they want to go. And we have this amazing diversity. In some places, one of our members moved to Atlanta, she didn't have as much choice. She had to deal with what there was if she wanted to go to the community. So it's really mostly about what suits you and where you find yourself. And is Zen too hard? Vipassana is pretty tough. It may have a softer edge, but you got to sit there for 45 minutes. They do 45 minutes sitting, 45-minute walking, 45 minutes sitting, 45-minute walking. We Zen people, it's so easy. We only sit for 30 minutes. And then we only walk for 10 minutes. You can't even get bored. By the time you get bored, you have to sit down again. So easy, hard, you choose. And it's that same person who gets enlightenment and helps all beings. We're already over time, so thank you all very much for listening and your participation.